Hello everyone, and welcome to today's ChannelVision webinar. Today we're very excited to feature BroadSky for a presentation on intelligent connectivity and the convergence of 5G, IoT, and AI. Today we're with Tom Benson, VP of Strategic Alliances at BroadSky, and Beau Barker, who is VP of Technology. Please stay tuned for a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can submit them through the Q&A portal located at the bottom of the Zoom platform. At this point, I'd like to turn the webinar over to Tom and Beau to begin. Guys?
Thank you for joining the webinar today. Thank you for that nice introduction. We are BroadSky Networks, and today we're going to talk about intelligent connectivity, which is really a convergence of two things. It's 5G, which is a massive trend in the marketplace, and then Internet of Things, another massive trend, and then artificial intelligence, which stitches it together. Beau and I are going to be doing this in sort of a trade-off format. We're going to be talking about 5G, and we're going to be talking about IoT, and then the business cases for that, for both of those technologies and how they weave together. One of the themes of this is going to be, and we're going to go to this fairly continually, is we're going to do the best job we can at giving use cases for IoT. The challenge with IoT is when you give one use case, you're ignoring 99 other ones, because this is such a broad application of technology to solve business problems. And so we're going to do the best we can at giving use cases, but one of the things we invite people to do is to sort of gather their questions as we go through and think about their use case for their business. Chances are it can be done. Just because we don't talk about it doesn't mean it can't be done. We just didn't think of it. There's just so many different use cases for this. And the other theme that we get into in this is that this is really a business outcome technology, not technology for technology's sake. And so in all cases, we're driving towards business technology, or pardon me, business outcomes. How can we get more efficient, better information? How can we lower maintenance costs? How can we get information sooner than we had it before? And how can we adjust our business practices to reap that information profitably? Because that's sort of the whole point. So kind of giving those themes, let me get into it. So the topics today are, and first of all, intelligent connectivity. How do you blend 5G, IoT, and IO together? And then where we are today. We're going to talk a little bit about 5G as well, and what is 5G today and what is 5G going to be. Beau's going to talk a little bit more about that than I, since he's our technical expert on this. And then we're going to get into selling IoT solutions. What can you sell? Who can you sell it to? Who's ready to buy? And also, have they deployed already? And are they not getting the return that they expected? And how can that be improved? So the market opportunity is quite large. The growth of the IoT market expected over the next 4 years is 57%. 55% of all data will be IoT by 2025. 70% of enterprises will run some use case by 2023, and wireless demand is looking to go up by 51%. So if you stitch this all together, BroadSky as a supplier is sitting in a spot where we can supply the wireless side, we can supply the IoT, we can supply the AI in various sort of a la carte fashion, or stitch it all together for people. But there's going to be a number of opportunities within your current market base and the market base you want to expand into to bring this technology in. And so we get a lot of practice runs with this as we hone in on where really the opportunities are in your market. So let's talk about intelligent connectivity first, the convergence of 5G, IoT, and AI. So with 5G fully realized, then intelligent connectivity is a combination of high-speed, low-latency 5G, which we are on the path to, plus AI, plus linking billions of devices together to report. The trend lines are clear. It's hard to get workers right now, is one trend that you're hearing. How can we take the staff that we have that are trained in our business and use them for either more customer-facing roles or more value-added roles, and automate some of the things that were previously used? It's not a question of replacing, bringing technology in and then replacing workers. It's a question of repurposing workers, which are very hard to find, into more, probably higher job satisfaction roles, honestly, and also more customer facing, and also providing more value to the end user, while sort of automating things that were previously done and letting the machine do that. Giving people a career path out, and then giving more perfect information coming back that isn't as reliant on the human element. So Beau, I'm going to ask you to talk about this slide and the next one, where we've sort of taken this into a layer cake And Beau, if you just want to talk about the differences between 5G millimeter wave, which is future, 5G sub-6, which is the current 5G that you see an advertisement for every day, and then where 4G gigabit LTE and 4G LTE networks fit into this, and then some of the things that they serve.
Absolutely. So I think one of the things on the carrier side really related to 5G millimeter wave, and essentially that's a much higher signal as far as frequency goes. The spectrum, it's up there, and so it doesn't penetrate into buildings well. But what it does do well is provide that ultimate high speed, low latency connection. So we see, that type of deployment more in the dense urban areas, in NFL stadiums. Certain street corners in certain bigger cities have it, but this isn't going to be, the 5G millimeter wave isn't going to be the ubiquitous 5G. So then we get into kind of that sub 6 gigahertz 5G, and T-Mobile's made a big marketing push around this, as well as the other carriers who just spent a bunch of money buying spectrum in this space. So sub 6 gigahertz, anything under 6 gigahertz, that will enable solutions like autonomous driving and all wireless WAN and mobile HD streaming, mobile high definition streaming, things like that sort of fall into this category. This will be the 5G that most of us will have access to. And then fundamentally 4G gigabit LTE is the base for all of this. And we'll see that kind of in the next slide, how the layers work as far as signal propagation and then some of those use cases put in there. But 4G is fundamental, and it drives things like sensors and rural type agriculture. Again, you can have wireless failover in retail and all of these different use cases that fit into that in a more coverage layer. So if we go to this next slide here, it will actually show us. There we go. So at the heart of it is really that coverage layer. The 4G LTE is there supporting all of this network connectivity. Even if the devices happen to transition from coverage layer into capacity layer, into mid-band or sub-6 5G and beyond, if they go into that high capacity layer, in the case of maybe a truck fleet, they're cruising along, they eventually go into the city area where millimeter wave is present, but fundamentally 4G is the kind of the beginning of the layer cake, as it were. And then the capacity layer is really that mid-band 5G. It doesn't spread as far as we can see from this illustration, which I love. You can see that's, it's not as broad spectrum, but certainly faster speeds, lower latency, and then we get into the kind of the middle of the cake there, that super high capacity layer, millimeter wave layer. So this kind of illustrates the differences in what's out there today, what the carriers are working on, and sort of how that frequency and signal propagates over distances and what can be provided there. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Tom. We can use our imaginations.
Use our imagination, right? So I'm not going to sing. I came close to singing once before, but I'm not going to. But this, obviously, Willy Wonka's up there. And the concept here, even if you remember this movie, Wonka invented all kinds of crazy stuff. The elevator that went vertical and then horizontal, and then I think he had a TV of some kind. The point of this is that if you bring your imagination into this, what could you do? If you can imagine something, we can build it. Now, having said that, we do have some prepackaged things as starting points in both sensor monitoring and camera monitoring that we're going to put out there. But those are going to be sort of a land and expand type opportunity where you bring these into people, they'll start seeing that they can get information from their business that they couldn't get before, or they can start seeing things they didn't know that they could see. And then their business practice is going to evolve from there. And so this will be very much an iterative approach of starting to solve one problem, which inevitably will lead to other problems that we could solve. And so let's get into real examples. So, turnkey solution examples. So safety and security is the one that is most translatable and most instant. What could you see that you currently aren't seeing? Security is the most obvious application for that. If you have a remote facility somewhere you can't look at, whether you're a power company or whether you're a construction site, if you need security of any kind, then you can put a camera on it. And with our service, not only can you put a camera on it, which is not that hard to do, but you can put rules around that so that anyone who gets within 2 feet of the fence, there's an actual actionable alert that comes off of that. So you don't have to have someone staring at it all the time to see it, which is a very boring job. Instead, the AI will alert you that someone's now within 2 feet of your fence, or they've been within 2 feet of your fence for more than 30 seconds. It's not a coyote, it's not a deer, it's a person. And so then we can go to that screen and then we can now monitor their intent. And so BroadSky is operating a NOC that's actually watching these things 24/7. Customers can build their own parameters around it, and we can do a call down actually on a loudspeaker. So we can say, to the person on the fence, you need to move along, police have been called. And then they generally scuttle away. You can also use this for illegal dumping. If your customer wants to see something and they want to be alerted for certain parameters, we can deliver that outcome. I'm not going to go through each one of these examples, but the industries and the sectors that they represent are massive. So intelligent transportation, while we've been monitoring fleets forever, we're still not monitoring fleets as well as we could. You can put a camera on the back of the truck to see every time the door opens. You can see what comes in and what goes out. You can monitor driver behavior both visually and also with sensor monitoring to say braking too hard, accelerating too hard, cornering too hard, going off route, lingering in one spot too long, and use it to build efficient route maps. You can count the number of people coming in and out of your building. Mass compliance is still relevant, although fading. But then another massive industry obviously is cold storage management. The rules and regulations on medicines and food are such that you have to prove that they were at a certain temperature, either above, below at all times. That's important for regulatory and also for quality control. Retail curbside pickup, there's an example we have that we piloted for Walmart actually. When someone pulls up to pick up their groceries, right now they have to log into an app, they have to notify someone they're there. The person walking out to deliver the groceries is the same person checking the app. What we do instead is if they input their driver's license number, or pardon me, their license plate number, as soon as they pull up, the AI recognizes that and the person walks out and hands them their order. It's much more efficient this way, and it stops people from lingering and waiting and having a poor customer experience. Then you get into the smart business column across the bottom. Actually, smart cities is a massive outlet for us, and if you have any exposure to that, it's worth taking a look at. Cities want to monitor their parks, they want to monitor their public spaces, and they also want to monitor their own infrastructure. Cities run a lot of trucks. They have extensive water infrastructure that they would like to monitor their tank pressure and their pump pressure and monitor for leaks, et cetera, et cetera. So cities are a big buyer of smart cities things, and they do have the budget for this, particularly if they want to monitor high traffic places or remote places, either way. And they're also a big buyer for illegal dumping services, since the cost inevitably kind of reverts back to them. When no one else is going to pick it up, the city's got to go do it. So one example we wanted to give was for a hospital. Every hospital is a massive buyer of IoT type services. They are monitoring their cold storage, they're monitoring their air quality, they're monitoring their oxygen levels, they're monitoring all kinds of things, obviously, right? So we can monitor the cold storage to make sure that if the freezer door got open and left open and that temperature starts to climb and you might have $1 million worth of pharmaceuticals in there, someone can go and close the door. Or also prove that the temperature never did spike over 32 or 0 or whatever it needs to be, okay? Then the second part is there's some intuitive monitoring this and remote storage. Even of the physical plant, one of the examples that was given is there was a water cooler that had a turbine running on the top with a fan, and that went out of variance such that it was starting to vibrate. It got so bad that they actually could hear it when they walked in a certain part of the hospital. The fan didn't go, but if it had, they would have had to shut down that cooling unit, and that would have affected multiple different regions of the hospital. And somebody ran up there and they went to the bypass and they did manage to fix it. If they would have put a sensor on that, they would have picked up the vibrate that was going out of vibration 2 weeks earlier, and they wouldn't have gotten to the point of almost catastrophic failure. So that's what IoT can deliver for that. So, and we actually have a use case for this of a hospital showing all the different things. I'm going to wait for that. But if you apply that concept to any business, any preventive maintenance routine, anything that they're doing for routing, anything where someone is regularly checking on something but doesn't know what the result's going to be, why not replace that with a sensor that you already know the result, and you can start routing your actions based on what's really happening versus having to send someone out to go check to see what's happening. So the concept that we came up with is, how would you run your business? How would your customers run their business if they had perfect information? Okay. So another example we give is in the hospitality industry. Now, mice are not particularly sexy and they're not particularly interesting, but they're a big problem. You can run afoul of health regulations if you have them, and customers obviously do not like them. So in a multi-level hotel, they might have 50 traps out there, and it was somebody's job to go check these traps. Well, they don't know if there's someone in there or not. So one person is running around checking the traps every day. It took them 4 hours. If instead you put a vibration monitor or a snap monitor on that trap and it just broadcasts, I've snapped, I'm full. Now you know which ones to go pick up and which ones you can leave alone. The second thing it'll tell you is what time did that happen, which probably is between midnight and 4 in the morning, but still, and you can see the frequency on it. So if you catch one and then you catch another one and you catch another one, that tells you where you need to put your trap, where the mice are concentrating and where you need to put your traps, versus this one hasn't been triggered in a month. Well, that's probably not that relevant. And so now you have information to actually get ahead of this, where you want to direct your exterminators or et cetera. You know where your problem is originating from. And it might be vectoring in from something you weren't expecting. So is it a mundane example? It is. But this particular business was able to save 1,500 man hours a year just by checking the traps when they were done versus sending somebody around. That person now can be repurposed for something more valuable to the business versus checking for dead mice. Second example, and again, these are smaller examples because we wanted to start with sort of entry-level, easily translatable examples, but this is a customer of mine, actually. They were sending somebody out, they're a fuel oil company, and they were sending somebody out to check the tank to see if their customer needed a refill. It wasn't, the volume use wasn't predictable from their customer, and so sometimes they'd go out and it was 60% full, so fine, they fill it up to 100. Other times they would go out and it was almost dry. Well, you can't have it dry, and so they were sending someone out more frequently than they needed to. They put one volume sensor and one router from BroadSky out there. So the router from BroadSky was not connected to the customer network in any way. They brought in their own internet connection, what we refer to as air gap security. So there were no concerns of bringing in some sort of permission or some sort of let me tunnel through your network to see what's going on at the fuel oil tank. They just brought in their own internet connection. Then they put on one sensor, and when it drops down to 20%, they send out the truck. There. Now they have perfect information, and every time they go out, they're at maximum profitability. So for the time they spent the driver, for the fuel oil they went, for the wear and tear on the vehicle, they filled it to 80, then they bill the customer. And so they, as a practical matter, they cut three trips a week, 3 trips a month, down to 1.5 trips per month, saving 1.5 trips, and it was an hour both ways. And that money went direct to the bottom line. All that expense went somewhere else. The time saved could be put for that employee to do something different. So in this case, it was a labor efficiency drag. Now, extrapolate it out to 100 tanks or 1,000 tanks. Now, the other example I give in this one is people run around and they collect used cooking oil. But they don't want to collect the used cooking oil until the reservoir tank is at 95%. Well, with demand, they never know how many French fries they're cooking. And so they were sending guys out, and sometimes they were picking them up at 70% full, other times 50% full, other times it had been full for 2 days. And now their customer's not happy. By putting a volume sensor on each one of those tanks, they knew when each tank was at 85%, and they would route their trucks accordingly. And so now they're showing up and they're picking up full tanks, dropping off new supplies. They become more efficient. And so their route efficiency in that particular example was 20 to 22% more efficient routes, and they were collecting 100% versus sometimes empty tanks when they went out. So they kind of won on both sides. Okay, so those are a couple examples on sensors. What we're trying to do to bridge the gap is to say, how do we package this? How do we productize this? How do we get this out into the marketplace so that you have some sort of starting point? And so we've broken this down into 3 different product bundles, if you will. One is just camera. And so we can put 4 cameras out there, or we can put 8 cameras out there. And these 8 cameras, they can pan, they can zoom, and they can be enabled with AI so that you can cover a lot of ground with these 8 cameras. You know, if you set them up on the outside of a building and point them out, you can monitor the gate, you can monitor the fence, you can monitor who's coming in and out of your property. Think about a car dealership as one example, or a storage facility as another example, or any example that you want to think of where you want to know what's happening on the perimeter of your highly valuable property. You can also add to this voice down speaker. That's what we talked about, where when there's an incident, someone from the NOC will actually get on and talk to the person based on parameters decided with the customer. And they can be mounted inside based on the customer's own internet connection, or they can be mounted outside, in which case we'll bring in a purpose-built router to provide air gap security again, so it's not touching their network in any way, shape, or form. And Beau, on the air gap security piece, you speak to this better than I do as to why customers are insisting on, or many customers are insisting upon, having an internet connection that is not tied to their LAN, their WAN, their internal network in any way.
Yeah, I think that's become more and more important as, you know, the threat vectors have increased. There's increase in bad actors out there. I would say probably one of the, a little funny, but one of the biggest drivers was an HVAC system that did get hacked because it was on network and the contractor left things kind of open. And a lot of businesses learn from that instance. And I think, you know, having the ability to air gap out a network so that the local IoT deployment is, or really anything that you need separated out, is totally separated from, and I use separated in a redundant form there, but it really is more secure by having these things completely defined and divided up versus, you know, your home network where you may have your Ring doorbell and all these IoT devices and everything sitting behind your firewall. Well, you know, those IoT devices beacon out to the network. You know, obviously industrial IoT is a little bit different, but still there is that threat vector there. It's a huge selling point, and oftentimes it is a security requirement as we come into these type of opportunities. So just, you know, as you go out and hear more about opportunities, think about ways to fit that in and use security as a selling point for IoT applications.
Yeah, the example was Target. It's getting a little bit, it's 4 or 5 years ago now, but it was a massive deal at the time. The HVAC vendor left a port open. A bad actor came in through that and was able to get all the way into the point of sale system, and they were stealing credit card information from Target. Target had a market cap loss of something like 5 or 6% because customers were not fundamentally confident that they could use their credit card at Target. That's a big deal. The CIO got fired. Wall Street was very unhappy, and every single enterprise corporation, publicly traded or private, learned from that mistake, and their resulting edict was, nobody's on my network who doesn't work for me. And since then, we've seen an explosion of companies who operate their business on site of someone else's business, whether it's for IoT or just for internet, bringing in their own internet from BroadSky. So they'll bring in their own router. It's air gap security. It doesn't touch it anyway, but they can still run their business on site. And if you think of all the businesses that are providing services of some kind, because America's outsourced everything, they're running the fuel oil tanks, they're running the HVAC, they're running the janitorial services, they're running the restock, they're running whatever it is that they're running. But a company has outsourced it to someone else who's a specialist in it. They have to have their own internet in order to run that business on site. And so they bring in an air gap security router from BroadSky and they run their business that way. So that's sort of that's the Target story, and it's a trend line that started 4 years ago, and it is not ending, and it's not ever going to end. If you think about all of the hacks that you hear about or read about on a regular basis, the SolarWinds thing just happened, and Microsoft just had a problem again. Hacking is never going away, and so one of the ways to do it is just don't let people in the first place. And so we have a solution for that. So going back to the slide. If we want to get out of cameras and we want to get into sensor packs, and we've bundled this into sensor packs of 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100. And so this is a machine monitoring something. So there's no optics on this at all. There's 150 different sensors available. We have a list on a slide coming up. But if you want to start with one control unit and 5 sensors on site to monitor these 5 things to give the information you need to run your business, that's a great starting point. And then start replicating that across a multi-location business. So that's either sensors or camera. And then these are all the different sensors. And well, I misspoke. These are not all the different sensors. These are just examples of sensors you could put out there. Obviously, I'm not going to read them all, but you can monitor temperature. You can monitor whether there's water there or not, whether there's pressure, what the volume is. If you get over to the electrical side, is the electricity in the range you want it to be? There's vibration control. There's vehicle detects, just see how many different vehicles came through the door, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where the door is open or closed, which is a security issue, what the temperature is, and is it within range? And then what's the historical measure on that? So you can prove it to anyone you need to that you're within compliance on that. This is a snapshot of the different sensors you can put out there. There's at least, I couldn't even tell you how many sensors there are. Chances are if you want to monitor something intelligently, you can monitor something intelligently. And chances are your customers are looking to monitor and they're already monitoring these things in a method that consumes time, versus we could just give them the information and then we can put it in a dashboard format so they can see what's happening on their physical plant now, versus sending somebody out who then fills in a report. You're looking backwards versus looking forwards. We'd like to put companies in a position where they're looking forward. So how do we do all this? What's the technology? What's the form factor for it? The form factor for this is called the UIG, Universal IoT Gateway. This is a standalone box that is deployed on site. This is air gap. And if you can see right in the middle of it, there's a cradle point router. That's a 4G, 5G, whichever flavor you want to go with, signal acquisition device that will bring in internet independent of the company's current internet connection. This is a hardened solution. It can be placed outside. This has been put in the oil fields of North Dakota where it's cold, and the oil fields of Texas where it's hot. This is a very rugged device built to run. It's also an edge computing device. It has quite a bit of processing power, so you're processing on site versus having to send it back over the internet connection to process in the cloud. That drives down the amount of data going over because most of the computation is being done on the outside. This can be used to power intelligent lookup where you're only looking at footage versus beaming it over the wireless connection. If we're talking about security footage, beaming it and making someone to look at it, you can record a month's worth of data on site and just review as necessary. It also comes with a LoRa gateway. LoRa is a long range wireless frequency. So you can start putting your sensors a mile away from this thing. In fact, I've heard further. Beau, what's the theoretical limit on a LoRa gateway as far as range?
That's a great question. It's several thousand yards.
Yeah, it's over a mile, but if we say a mile, you put one of these in the middle and then everything within 1 mile of that UIG is now observable. And then you can also start to daisy chain these together so that they'll talk to each other. So you're not just covering something within the eye. You can cover something if you think about any energy deployment or any far-flung deployment where you want to monitor it. You can start putting a sensor up to a mile away from each one of these, and they'll report back just as if it's a wired connection. So you're extending the range of what you can monitor by using LoRa. So one example, going kind of back to the smart city concept or the security concept is, this installation you see on the left, you can see the speaker, you can see the box that the UIG is sitting inside, and then you can see the 2 cameras that are feeding. This is a community that's monitoring a park. It was next to a railway, and so they could see whether people were jumping over the fence coming off of the train tracks and going into the park. The community didn't like it. They put this on there, and then you can also see that blue light. Blue light signifies police presence. Immediately after putting this in, incidents dropped by 50 or 60%, just because people don't want to be viewed, and they don't want to be viewed by what may be law enforcement presence. People who want to do things wrong don't like to be observed while doing it, and so they will go somewhere else to do those things. So that's the park concept. And then in this video, which is I'm going to hit here and it's going to work, what we're going to see here is someone approaching a remote power station their intent is likely to either cause damage, do graffiti, or possibly steal copper. And so when I click this, you'll see what actually happened once the security system was enabled.
This is security. You are trespassing. Leave now. Police have been called. To the person at the gate, this is security. You're trespassing. Leave now. Police have been called.
So I don't know what would have happened if that person had been allowed to act unobserved, but I know it did happen once they were observed. They left, and they're not coming back. They're going to look for another target where they can take all the time they want to do whatever it is that they intended to do. So that could have been, I don't know the damage that person could have caused, but that power station represents easily a 7-figure investment from the power company. And they clearly don't want people on site, and that person clearly wanted to get on site. And so that's what the technology does, is it eliminated that risk to that 7-figure plus investment, plus whatever the follow-on effects would have been if they had managed to break or damage something. Okay, needed to advance there. There's some different form factors that this can be deployed as well, just kind of getting into more of the granular detail of this. You can put it on a light pole. A light pole already has power, obviously, so it can be mounted there. So there's light poles all over the place. You can also deploy it a little bit more incognito, where the UIG and the cameras are sitting inside a box that looks like high voltage electricity, but it's actually a camera outlet that is observing what's going on. There's a rapid deploy kit on a tripod mount that can be put anywhere. You can also mount solar power to that. And then finally, for things that need a little bit more beef, there's a trailer that we can put out there. That trailer is transportable, obviously. Think about construction sites, think about high value activities that are going to be happening for a short period of time and then move on to the next one. You can move your security services on this trailer to each site as you go. And then when it's done, you just transport it to the next one. These are all powered by BroadSky wireless internet connectivity. So needing internet on site is irrelevant if necessary, or if they can get a wired connection to it, then so be it. But either way, the places you can deploy this using these different form factors become pretty ubiquitous and are really only limited by the imagination of, is it valuable enough for me to observe? If it is, I can observe it. So going back to the hospital example, but really you can apply this example to any enterprise business that has a number of activities going. This is sort of a blended application of both video and sensor monitoring that can all be powered off of one UIG, okay? So you have we gave the example of the HVAC cooler, the cooling tower in the upper right-hand corner where the fan started to get out of alignment. If a sensor had been on that, they could have fixed that 2 weeks sooner. And then you go down to monitoring from a security standpoint, what's happening in the parking lot. Security around major hospitals is a big deal. A number of incidents do happen around hospitals because of the high number of people coming in and out. So now you have security on that. That's just one separate feed. Then you look at, there's a cold storage monitor that you can see where your temperatures are for your pharmaceuticals. You could put a monitor in your food prep places to make sure that food was cold enough as long as it needed to be, and then hot enough when it went out the door. That cuts down on liability, et cetera, et cetera. There's a number of very, very robust systems in a hospital, and they all are reporting information at all times. And so if you're in the hospital market, this is really sort of an off-the-shelf solution for you. But you could apply this to a major manufacturing facility. You could apply this to any infrastructure that you have a number of employees coming in and out of. The machinery and the processes going on at that location, the customer wants to monitor things at all times, and they want to get out in front of it, and they want to fix things before they limit production or cause a follow-on problem in their supply chain in some fashion. So that's sort of an enterprise plant example of different IoT applications. Then on a smaller form factor, just a retail store, again, there's a number of applications for this, and the amount of retail that's going to survive all the weirdness of the last 15 months is going to need to become more efficient. Any company who's still in retail needs to be as efficient as possible. I guess let's just say it like that. So there's an obvious security aspect of it to prevent shoplifting. But there's also, queue management. If more than 3 people are in line, you want to know that ahead of time. And so you can get another staff member up to make sure people are being able to check out properly. Then you can put a Wi-Fi for store handhelds or for guest access if that's part of their business thing. If you look at the camera on the front, the AI that's attached to that can actually tell you the demographics of the people who walked in. So male, 25 to 34, female, 44 to 45. You can see if your advertising is actually bringing the people in that you thought you were bringing in, or perhaps you're bringing in a demographic you haven't been advertising to and you need to advertise to them more. So the marketing people very much want to know the demographics of who's walking in the door, because that tells them, is my advertising reaching the target market that I thought? And then finally, the whole thing can be run over a 4G LTE connection, which conveniently can also be used for either point of sale or failover point of sale internet. So that if they lose their wired connection, they can continue to process credit card transactions. So 2 different case studies, 2 different concepts, large plant, retail plant. I invite you to use this as a jumping off point into your customer base and what could they be monitoring. So this is a fully managed integrated solution. These different stacks, it starts with an air-gapped wireless connectivity solution so that it's not touching the customer LAN. And then we can get it cameras if they want. The computing is at the edge, so the processing power is being done on site. Okay? And then the sensor data is processed on site. And then the reporting and the managed services, which I'm going to get into in the next screen. So it's not just information for information's sake. The reporting aspects of this are just as important. Once we've gathered the information, what are we going to do with it, and how can we present it in a fashion that's actionable versus just, I have information, what do I do with it? As an aside, I want to say a number of customers have different siloed IoT solutions out there that are presenting information, but it isn't actionable because it's not being presented in any sort of intelligent format. And if they have disparate different solutions, they're not all showing up on one dashboard. So I want to talk about that in just a second. But information that you can't act on is useless information. So different outcomes that we're talking about, has the temperature exceeded? Is the tank low? Is someone after hours? These are all the different use cases we sort of have talked about already. And again, just by giving these examples, we're excluding hundreds of other examples. And so that's what we're hoping to drill into further with, the customers that you're approaching is, what do we need to design to give them the information they need to run their business better? So this is the dashboard that I was speaking to. Once you have this information flowing in, what do you do with it? And so we have a number of different sensors on the left-hand side, be it the generator, the battery, the fuel tank, et cetera. This could be anything or more, but then it flows over to the IoT and then it outputs into IntelliSite's Deep Logic, Deep Insights platform. And so these are dashboards that someone on a control plane can actually be monitoring. It shows current conditions and it also shows trendline conditions. So what's been happening now, what's been happening over the last 30 days, what's been happening over the last 12 months. You can also set thresholds for any of this so that any of these bars exceed X, that becomes an alert. It can send a text message, an email message. There's a number of different forms that can pop out to say, you've set this threshold for this, you've exceeded this threshold, now you have the information, and then that can just automatically flow into their workflow and say, go check the fan blade, go fill the fuel tank, whatever it needs to be. So it's alerting people days in advance or weeks in advance that something's happening. And so operations directors, finance people, risk management people can use this to run the business, and they can also go back to look at the historical performance to say, do we have exposure here, or were we within parameters at all times? The freezer has been at below 0 for 30 straight days. It's never went above 0. I have no exposure. And all my product in there is still safe, and I can confidently sell it out because I can prove it's been underneath the temperature it needed to be at during that time. You see what I'm trying to say. So this dashboard becomes where the information goes to make the inputs coming in actually usable. So this is a little bit tighter screenshot of the platform itself. These are where the alerts come from. You can also integrate this with third-party software. So if you need to put this into Kafka or Spark or AWS, et cetera, where the alert doesn't just die here, it can be fed into what the business is already using. That's the beauty of AI and of API hooks and of data sharing, is that they can put this right into their current workflow so that they have the information they need versus just some separate Excel spreadsheet that someone has to translate. What do we need to do now? Okay. So it's not just the information, it's the information that flows into an actionable result. And this is an even tighter close-up of just an energy consumption board, okay? So you can see meter A, meter B, meter C. Whether these are within the parameters they want them to be or they're not, I don't know, but the person running it would know that, okay? These are actually, they can manipulate this and go into different results to see what's happening both now and over the last week and over the last 30 days. So, and then there's a screen for this that you can drill into, and then you can back up and start seeing snapshots, and then you can drill into your pressure side, and then you can back up, and then you can drill into your fuel level side, et cetera, et cetera. So each screen becomes actionable where you can see what's happening, and then all of these can put out an alert, put out a threshold exceed alert, and flow into your current business process management software, wherever it would be, so that you can act upon this. So here's another example of just fuel tanks. So if you look at fuel tank 1, 11% means action, and then the number of gallons in it. This one needs to be filled. Fuel tank 2 does not need to be filled, and fuel tank 3 looks to be recently filled. So this should corroborate back with your routing and your ticketing system as to how much fuel did I put in there. It should also match up with how much do we expect it to use. If I'm billing someone for how much fuel comes out of that tank, I can flow this into my billing system. And then lower left-hand corner, you can see your historical levels over time to make sure that you're filling things up properly. You can present this information to your customer, show we're doing our job. And then finally, even on a GPS map, it shows you where the tank is. So just more jumping off points is the information a company could get. And if they didn't have this, how are they doing it now? Is it on an Excel spreadsheet? Is it in a notebook somewhere? Is it shareable, or does someone have to email that info versus I can give this access to multiple people who want to know this for different reasons? Accounting wants to know, routing wants to know, operations wants to know, and they can all see it at the same time without having to email the information back and forth. So the takeaways from this, and so I invite your questions. I see there's 2 questions in the Q&A already. This is a very Q&A oriented product. And sometimes we learn a lot more in the Q&A than we learn in the prezo, just by people taking the information and then trying to apply it to opportunities that they've come across or are thinking that they could supply a solution. They want to drill into it further. But the top 5 takeaways on this are the opportunity is enormous. Companies are only going to get more efficient, and if they don't get more efficient, they're going to have a hard time competing in the modern world. If you look at the Amazon effect, and Jeff Bezos's statement, "Your margin is my opportunity." People have to keep getting more efficient. They can't do what they've been doing by throwing bodies at it. They have to use technology to run their business more effectively. And so that's really what IoT does. It is not technology because it's cool. It's technology because we can run our business better. Okay. Solutions usually start with a simple concept, and then they inevitably get customized. So we're going to start off the shelf, and then we're going to dig in. And you're not going to be talking to the IT director for long. Operations is going to come in. Executive is going to come in. People who want to see what they want to see because they want to launch something they haven't shared with the people yet because they didn't have the information they needed to launch it, but now that they have the information, they could. So business plans will start getting run by people. Can we do this? Could we do this? If we could do this, then we could do this. Those are the conversations that you're going to be involved in. And frankly, they're kind of more fun. I can get you a 100 meg internet connection or a 1 gig internet connection where before I can only get you a 50. It's nice, but it's transactional. This is sitting side by side with a company and say, how do we want to run this better? And how can I provide you with a solution to do that? Most business people like those conversations. They like to be involved in that. And inevitably, you become a trusted advisor as we roll this out. As a sidebar effect, it's going to spawn new technology initiatives. And traditionally in the channel, we want to be on the front end of the planning curve. They're going to need more internet. They're going to need more cloud. They're going to need a number of things that are more traditional channel sale product. Those opportunities, you'll be ahead of the curve versus waiting for bid curve. I need more storage and cloud, et cetera. Say, well, we can just funnel this in and you can start building solutions above the IoT stack with the portfolio of vendors that you're currently relying on to get a greater wallet share from your customer itself and be there earlier in the planning stage. The IoT buyers may start in IT, but they may not. We're going to touch any number of different departments who need to see what they need to see. So it's a broader account penetration when we start talking about these solutions. When IT asks about air gap security or how do I keep this off my network, or I'm very concerned about hackers coming in, we have a ready-made solution for that. It's not running on your network. That answers 99% of the question. Then it comes down to, is it fast enough? How much is it going to cost? Will it work? And we can help you answer all those questions. But the fundamental question is, how do I secure this from my current LAN that I'm already getting attacked every day on? And the answer is, it's not on your current LAN at all. And then finally, it's sort of as a concept, what we came up with is using a UCaaS mindset, a unified communications as a service mindset. If you look at the value of UCaaS that's been delivered over the last 15 years, it started with VoIP and now it's into UCaaS. The distributors and the sales agents and the people at the front end of this, 90% of the value that was delivered from UCaaS was not cost savings and technology. What was delivered, 90% of the value, and it did cost a little bit less, right? VoIP lines cost less than 1 FB and PRI, but that wasn't where the value came from. What the value came from is, how can I adjust my business so that since people are in touch at all times and they never lose a message, and now we got into Zoom meetings and Teams meetings and we can exchange information more easily, businesses are running more efficiently than they used to be. I mean, for example, people are working from home now because of UCaaS. That literally wasn't possible in 1995. So the value of the UCaaS mindset is, how do I solve a business problem? And the value of the IoT mindset is the same. Yes, it's technology based, but we're using it to solve a business problem. What business problems would you like to solve? And let's get started. Okay. So with that, we're going to move into the Q&A section. If you're interested in being involved in this, BroadSky has channel managers across the country. Please look to the area that you sit, not the area that your opportunity sits. So in the Southeast, you talk to Todd Hulsenbeck, Northeast, Mike Cardinal, in the Midwest, Ash Kakish, and then in the Northwest, Jim Miller. Southern California is Amy Eshelman, and the Southwest is Scott Sharple. If you happen to be in a position where your business is actually billing for services, if you're a managed service provider or you have a billing platform, that would be BroadSky white label services, and that's what I handle. So we do have the ability to white label everything we've talked about today and bill it on your paper. Okay.
All right. Thank you for the great presentation. Let's go into Q&A. Why don't we start by talking a little bit more about use cases? I'm wondering if you could go over some specific use cases, including HVAC, which I understand is a big one. And also, how do you prioritize which use cases to pursue against the engineering, marketing, or sales effort needed to win that use case?
So the question was on priorities. Where do you start? If you look at any company's main line of business, they're monitoring what's happening on that. And so I would, start with the obvious. If they're a distribution and trucking firm, they're not in the business of driving trucks. They're in the business of going out to do something with those trucks. And so how do we monitor the endpoint of where those trucks are going? If everyone comes to them, do they know who's coming to them? And would their business run better if they knew who was coming to them and how many people were coming on a regular basis? Any business operation that can be improved by better information flowing from either the endpoint or internal, either way, can be improved by IoT. And so that's where I would prioritize as a starting point. My second answer to that is I would start in my current customer base. That is traditionally speaking in the channel model, we build a relationship with an end user. We tend to know what their problems are. Maybe we didn't have a solution for that before, but we can start a conversation about that now. The relationship already exists, And so it's just a question of going back in and saying, what is your IoT initiative? What do you need to look at that you haven't been able to look at before? I wasn't particularly able to help you with that, but I've been studying on this and now I believe I have something for you. Let's talk about it. That's how I would prioritize in going to the marketplace, is definitely starting your current customer base.
Okay, great. And how can I apply intelligent connectivity or IoT to my current customer base?
If you look at them and kind of speaking to what I said before, I would compile a list of people who either are open to a conversation or we're having problems, or they have a budget to look at things. The smaller customers that have 2 employees and can see everything from the counter are probably not the starting point. But anybody who has far-flung operations or more than one location, or are sending themselves out to locations to do something, there's definitely an opportunity for that.
Okay, great. And what are some conversation starters that you recommend when speaking with customers?
So the classic one is just, we've all heard about IoT. Do you have Internet of Things opportunities? And then the answer traditionally is, I've been hearing a lot about this. I don't even know where to start. And then the bridge point is said, okay, well, let's look at your business operations and again, follow the money. If you look at your budget, what's more than 5% of budget that's regularly going on? And how much of that is just to gather information in order to act upon? And if you already have that information, how would you act upon it differently? Or if you look at this high value concentration of assets that you have, how many different things, be it preventive maintenance, waste pickup, how many people are coming out of the door, et cetera, how many things are you spending time just checking to see you need to do something, versus if you already knew what the condition at that plant was, how would you do things differently? Anybody who has an extensive collection of assets at a certain site is monitoring those assets on a regular basis using manpower, not intelligence. And so that's the opportunity for them, is to get the information they need. I would start it with a pilot project. I would start it with, let's monitor the 5 most valuable things out there that you're regularly touching, that have to run perfectly at all times in order for you to do whatever it is that you do. Why don't we put a sensor on all 5 of those so you can see the conditions that you need? And you're currently spending time on monitoring with people power, and instead use machines to do it instead. And then let's go from there.
Excellent, excellent. And does part of your business include monitoring?
As far as both security monitoring with cameras and event monitoring with either sensors on an asset. So in both cases, yes. There's a lot of monitoring to this, but to me, monitoring is the tip of the iceberg. The security aspect that we showed, maybe that was 100% of the value, that we monitored the person coming up to the fence and then we told them to go away. I would say 100% of the value was delivered in that case. The business didn't get better, it protected itself from getting worse, right? But on the other hand, there's a lot of monitoring going on right now because to do something about it, but it becomes inefficient. We're checking tanks too often. We're running preventive maintenance routines whether we need to or not. And we're doing that just to get ahead of the curve. So monitoring becomes an aspect of this that allows you to get in front of things. And then the other piece I would comment on that is, it's not about the monitoring per se. You have to get the information, but then you have to put it somewhere so that people can actually act on it. Monitoring for monitoring's sake does no one any good. If the temperature thing is starting to go past the threshold, but nobody sees it and no one can act on it, we haven't done anything. So gather the information, put it through an AI, put it on a dashboard where we can see it, and then integrate it with your current business process management software so you can act upon it without even having a person make a decision. It passed the threshold, now do something about this. Someone gets a daily report, they can act on it immediately. People start getting a week ahead and 2 weeks ahead versus being a week behind or 2 weeks behind.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions from a couple attendees. One question is, How do you prioritize which use case to pursue against the engineering, marketing, sales effort needed to win that use case? Should we be first mover, fast follower, or second mover? I'm not sure that the opportunity to be first mover exists anymore. IoT is well established. And so while your customer may have not heard of it, well, where your customer may not be contemplating because they don't know, they've clearly heard of it. And so first mover was in 2017. The existing state of affairs out there right now, as the reality is, you have some failed pilot projects where information is being presented, but no one can act on it. You have some technology things where they probably went with something that didn't work as well as it could have. They didn't invest properly, and so now it's not running that well. But the concept is they want to do this, and they want to do it now. And so most people, I would say the answer to that is we're in probably fast follower or establish yourself as an expert mode right now. This is a 10 to 20 year use case. This will be a topic of conversation next year and 5 years from now and 10 years from now, undoubtedly. And so people who establish themselves as being able to provide solutions today have a really long runway of providing solutions going forward. We'll be following opportunities for a while as people put out, I'm looking for this, 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 and this, but you'll start to transition to leading opportunities and going to companies and say, did you know you could do this, this, and this? I've already done this. Let's see if it makes sense for you. And that's really where we want to be. In the channel, I've noticed we tend to be about 2 years ahead of the curve. And so we have information now that's going to be fairly ubiquitous 2 years from now. And in that 2 year window, we introduce our customers to what they were going to use anyway 2 years sooner. And then we just keep saying 2 years ahead of the curve. This is 2 years ahead of the curve stuff right now. There are very few vendors, if any, who can provide this integrated solution across the board. And so, yeah, I would say, I mean, the time is definitely now. This is just not something that can be not pursued any longer, or the entire segment is going to be closed off. And then the second question I have on my screen here, with IoT AI, it seems that once you've sold X to a customer, they won't need to buy it again from you or others for Y years. Are we in a situation where repeat purchases, customer retention loyalty should not be relied upon? Well, this is all in the channel model, to answer the question. And so I would say no. This, in fact, is the opposite of that. Most of this is sold on a CapEx, a no CapEx basis. So this is all OpEx. This is all 200 a month, 400 a month, 800 a month, $1,000 a month solutions. And so this fits right into the traditional channel model where we place it out there. BroadSky funds the equipment. We put it out there and then we start sending a bill, and then the customer pays the bill, and then we send it to the master agent, and then the master agent pays you. So this is definitely something where you're building a recurring business model off of. And then inevitably that first pilot case is going to grow into a larger case. And then the expertise gained from the pilot case and the follow-on case can be used to solve similar problems if you want to specialize in something for similar industries, or puts you in a place where you can respond to opportunities as they come by versus letting them, kind of having to let them go. So very much, this is a channel model, build an MRC, recurring revenue stream over time opportunity.
Fantastic. Okay, that should wrap up today's webinar. Big thank you to the BroadSky team, and of course to all of you for attending today's event. To access this webinar on demand, please head over to channelvisionmag.com. Also keep an eye out for a follow-up email from ChannelVision. Thanks, everyone.